Hello everybody, Carl here. Welcome to my astrology video for October 2012. Right here, right now, I'm not even going to try to say anything about October in this introductory section. October just defies words, and putting it into words once was enough. I'm not going to try to do it here in capsule form. What I would like to do is deal with a couple of scheduling issues. Now, as you know, December is the big 2012 time. The big 2012 chart occurs in December 2012, a couple of months away. And I wanted to do a separate chart for that, but would that really count for December? I mean, people are interested in 2012, but they need to know about December as opposed to 2012. Well, it turns out that in November and December, there are a series of 3 eclipses. So I'm thinking what I'll do is, in November, I'll do a chart for the 3 eclipses, one of which is actually in December. And then for December, I will do a video on the 2012 chart. And I'm not sure how that all nets out, but I'm pretty sure if we do it that way, we'll end up with a fairly good picture of what's happening on the ground among us mere mortals and what the planets are doing with the whole 2012 thing. Okay, now, it's so difficult to really talk about this chart, not because it's so bad necessarily, it's just so different, so complex, so unprecedented, so unusual, that I think it's best just to launch into the graphic section and say what I have to say there. I'll have a couple of words at the end of the video. I'll see you then. Last month's chart, September's chart, reveals the consequences of actions and supports decisions based on those perceived consequences, setting the tone for the whole season. Fall 2012, September, October, and November is a season of decision, of major choices. More specifically, in September's chart, the moon's nodes are aligned with the vertical or power axis of the chart. This means that personal, economic, and political alliances began shifting in accordance with a fundamental shift of attitude. Those interested in this development can refer to September's video. If you've been paying attention to the American presidential campaign, I think you'll agree that a series of very striking events in the campaign has or is leading to a substantive shift of political attitudes in the United States. October's chart is another high-energy chart that generates new decision points. New points of departure will proliferate. Disruptive events will abound. The changeful trends, the shift of consciousness, the shift of attitudes based on observation and experience, this kind of substantive shift will continue apace in October. As a matter of fact, the kinds of changes I'm expecting in October will dwarf those that we saw in September. There will be many more of them. They will be far more varied. October's chart will build upon, amplify, intensify the shift or the shifts that we saw beginning in September. In technical terms, strictly abstract technical terms, October's chart is fairly amazing. The angles, the most sensitive points in the chart, are all occupied by the 0 point, the 0 degree of the cardinal signs native to each of those angles. Now, the 0 degree, the 0 point of a cardinal, of any sign actually, but of a cardinal sign in particular, is a very powerful surgy expansive kind of point. And the cardinal signs are by nature decisive. They call for decisions. So we can see at very first glance that this chart has decision point, tipping point, inflection point, sudden inflection points written all over it. So when we see the 0 point, the 0 degree of a cardinal sign on an angle, especially on the angle to which it is native, its home angle, so to speak, we must expect decisive changes of direction, surprising decisive changes of direction. And since each angle affects the whole chart, and each angle has its own home, the 0 degree of its own home sign on the angle, this decisiveness, this trigger point effect is compounded. It is magnified, amplified. 0 degrees, 25 minutes Aries is on the ascendant. 0 degrees, 31 minutes Cancer is on the cusp of the 4th house, the Imam Cheli. 0 degrees, 25 minutes Libra is on the descendant, on the cusp of the 7th house, the 7th house of partnership. 0 degrees, 31 minutes Capricorn is on the cusp of the 10th house, the midheaven, with numerous decision points radiating from each angle of the chart. Existing trends will veer suddenly and rapidly in new directions. New trends and phenomena will spring violently and forcefully into existence. The whole chart seems like a portal into an entirely different timeline. All of the tipping points we've been hungering for, all of the points of change or decision that we've been longing for so many months now, they're going to hit us in spades in October. A blizzard of decision points. When you see an avalanche, a massive tidal wave of decision points, you're talking about a turning point in history itself. We don't come back from a changeful month like October. Things don't slip back into old patterns. They are thrust forward at maximum speed. So, in October, extremely volatile, unpredictable, high-energy conditions will prevail. A seemingly small impetus will have sudden and dramatic effects. Novel, unexpected events will seemingly come out of nowhere. Changes will also be decisive and irreversible. In the past, political leaders have spoken about great leaps forward. We remember the Arab Spring, which was a big leap forward historically for the Arab nations. Think of this as a global spring, as a great leap, a great global leap forward. We're talking about sudden, sweeping, high-energy changes of direction on a massive scale, on a global scale. Countless trends and event streams will shift significantly and simultaneously. It's going to be one confusing, high-energy month. The political junkies among us will find ourselves glued to our favorite 24-hour cable news channel. Given the number, the sheer scope, the speed of the changeful events we're talking about, the very notion of predicting them, controlling them, or reversing them, they're just absurd in this context. That's not going to happen. This is a major, irreversible turning point. Contributing to this big, epic inflection point is Saturn's movement into Scorpio It happens on October 5th, Greenwich Mean Time, and it will be in Scorpio. Saturn will be in Scorpio until 2015. Saturn in Libra marked the U.S. Saturn return. And whatever else Saturn was doing in Libra, whatever else, it was also operating as a depressive influence on the U.S. economy. And because the U.S. economy is so important globally, Saturn in Libra was depressing the entire global economy. Now, with Saturn moving out of Libra, taking its depressive influence off the U.S. economy, global economic conditions should improve noticeably, markedly, and it's something we should notice fairly quickly. This is not going to be a long, drawn-out transitional economic phase. We should almost feel a kind of bounce. Saturn's movement out of Libra, the sign of partnership, into Scorpio, will also have a broad, general, positive effect on politics at the local, regional, national, and international levels. Saturn will no longer be locking us into old patterns. It will no longer be exercising a chilling, retarding effect on the formation of partnerships and alliances. That's a good thing. Saturn in Scorpio will bring a surprisingly wide variety of very important issues that affect us very directly, very personally, very concretely, pervasively. It will bring a lot of these issues to the fore. Military expenditures will come under scrutiny, military expenditures in all kinds of military affairs, from alliances to military missions, wars and such. Conflict over nurturance issues will peak. Conflict over beginning of life and end of life issues will peak. Saturn in Scorpio is so important because Scorpio is the sign of transformation. It is a sign where individual responsibility becomes collective responsibility. It's the sign where the responsibilities of one generation become the responsibilities of the next generation. It's the sign where one person's money kind of blends with another person's money. It's also the sign where the power of the individual combines with the power of the group, where the power of individual citizens becomes the power of a nation. It is also the sign where non-existence turns into existence. It is a sign where existence turns into non-existence. You get the idea. It's a very profound, very powerful, a very mysterious sign. We're not necessarily going to see a giant leap forward in our efforts to resolve this huge tangle of issues, of interrelated issues. Rather, we're likely to see a protracted, hard-fought battle to achieve a new consensus on all of these issues, a long, painstaking effort to break out of old patterns. And I'm pretty sure, given the scale and the importance of the issues, that it's going to take the entire 2.25-year transit of Saturn in Scorpio to really work through these things. In fact, the emotions of excitement and anticipation that are inspired, that are stirred up by all of the changeful events that will take place in October, are really going to collide head-on with Saturn's depressive, retarding, slowing down effect. We're going to expect lightning-fast, wonderful transformations and changes, and Saturn is going to say, hold on, wait a minute, let's look at this more closely, much more closely. So you've got kind of a set of conflicting emotions, powerful conflicting emotions, over very important issues will be unleashed in October. On the micro level, on the personal level, where we live, a lot of issues revolving around personal boundaries will come to the fore. Do you really have to spend all that money on potato chips or pizza? Can't we save a little bit for some new furniture? Do you really need all that space for your stuff? Do you need to spread out so much when you're studying? Do you have to sit so close? Do you have to play your music so loud? These seemingly everyday issues, the kind of thing that we often just flow with, these things are going to become issues with a capital I. People are going to get kind of touchy about them. And Saturn in Scorpio will almost certainly have a chilling effect on human intimacy. Human intimacy will become even more complicated than it already is under prevailing astrological conditions. Just to take one example, Scorpio governs reproductive sexuality. And with Saturn in the sign of reproductive sexuality, having kids or just having an intimate relationship with someone is going to suddenly become much more difficult than it already is. It will become even more problematic. But the level of complexity keeps on rising. The North Node moved into Scorpio at the end of August. So the North Node is in Scorpio along with Saturn. And the North Node will be there until early 2014, quite a while really. Now the North Node placement dramatically increases the impact of Saturn in Scorpio and vice versa. Saturn in Scorpio is going to dramatically increase the impact of the North Node in Scorpio. And this is a heavy influence, a potent influence hitting a very potent part of the chart that is going to be going on for, well, a year. The worst of it is going to be going on for about a year. After about a year, at the beginning of 2014, the North Node will move on into Libra. It moves backwards through the zodiac, leaving only Saturn in Scorpio to contend with, which is no small thing, but I think it's better than having the North Node and Saturn in Scorpio to contend with. Eighth house or Scorpio issues are never light. They are never easy to deal with. Decisions regarding all eighth house Scorpio issues are difficult and fateful. Nurturance issues, beginning and end of life issues, reproductive issues, large shared resources and responsibilities, social programs, boundaries, important property, financial, personal boundaries, the creation, the maintenance, and the use of military power, all of these big issues enter a final difficult decision-making mode. That's going to be one heck of a fight, trying to come to a new consensus about these issues. But unlike some planets, unlike some indicators, the North Node really isn't that equivocal. It's not that vague. It tells you what it wants. And with the North Node in Scorpio in the 8th house, the emphasis in searching for a solution should be on collective responsibility and collective action. People need to look for solutions at the collective governmental level, not on the individual or grassroots level. Now, to be sure, the individual has a role to play. Individual rights and responsibilities are major issues. But what the North Node is telling us is that we really can't expect the individual acting alone to solve the problem of insurance or pensions or military power or any of these things. These are things that we need to do together, that we can only do together. Now, the issue of individual rights and responsibilities, that's in the mix. But when it comes to solving the kinds of problems we're talking about, it must be done in a collective, group, cooperative way. You really can't just dump all these things in the lap of the individual and expect them realistically to come up with a solution. At least not with the North Node in the 8th house in Scorpio. So we're talking about working out solutions, working out a new guiding philosophy to some of the most important issues anyone has to deal with in life. And while doing it, at least while the North Node and Saturn are both in Scorpio, which would be, as I say, until the beginning of 2014, so for a little over a year now, we are going to face some of the most difficult and important decisions of our lives under fairly difficult astrological conditions. Saturn will make it more difficult and more important to fulfill North Node requirements. The North Node will magnify the consequences of failure. That is quite a challenge. We're talking about a do or die, make it or break it moment in our history. If you can believe it, the astrological picture is even more complicated than our discussion so far might have led you to believe. Even more complicated. The part of fortune is exactly conjunct the midheaven. The midheaven is at 0 degrees 31 minutes Capricorn. The part of fortune is located at 0 degrees 25 minutes Capricorn. That's a really, really close conjunction. What that means, though, is that the part of fortune is pretty much exactly square all of that extraordinarily dynamic energy coming from the 0 degree of the cardinal signs on their home angles. Now, the part of fortune is often spoken of in a somewhat offhanded manner, in passing, but it's actually a very potent little spot in the chart. The part of fortune combines the energy of the ascendant, the moon, and the sun, all of the points that define individual identity. Not to put too fine a point on it, we can say that radical transformative energy is striking every facet of the relationship between individuals and the world around them, as that world is undergoing a profound historic transformation. If I were given to astronomical metaphors, I would say that this is something of a psycho-spiritual supernova event. Dramatic, sweeping changes in the outer world are taking place at the same time as dramatic inner changes. The outer and the inner changes coalesce into a single, outsized, off-the-chart kind of event. It's going to shake up a lot of things and a lot of people, really shake them up. Now I'm going to present something that I think should cheer us all up a lot and remove a great deal of the anxiety that the first part of this video probably inspired. I need to say something about the Saturn-Uranus cycle. During the part of the Saturn-Uranus cycle when Saturn is separating from Uranus, Uranus rules Saturn. This is not good. It brings out, or it allows, or it encourages and supports all the loopiest, fringiest, extremist, unseemly facets of Uranian phenomena. It's a crazy, freaky kind of time. And it goes on for quite a while because it takes Saturn quite a few years, really, to get all the way around to the next part of the cycle. The past couple of years with Saturn in Libra and Uranus in Aries, these 2 years marked the midpoint in the cycle. Uranus went head-to-head with Saturn, which is not very good because it still allows the fringy, loopy, freaky side of Uranus far too much reign. There are a lot of crazy-talking politicians, a lot of snake oil being sold to the people, a lot of distortion, deception, a lot of half-baked, half-thought ideas presenting themselves as big solutions to huge problems. When Saturn enters Scorpio, October 5th or thereabouts, we enter the phase of the Saturn-Uranus cycle during which Saturn governs, Saturn rules Uranus. This is much better. The loopy, fringy, extremist kinds of reasoning, they're suppressed. People are no longer dazzled by Uranian BS. They are more prone to listen to dull but very sensible, fact-based, rational Saturn. That's good. Since 2002 or 2003, along in there, a similar shift has occurred in the 3 major Saturn cycles. Beginning about then, we entered the phase of the Pluto-Saturn cycle and the Neptune-Saturn cycle in which Neptune governed, in which Neptune had the upper hand. As of October 5th, Saturn is in a dominant position in all 3 major Saturn cycles. And trust me, guys, having watched this happen over the last decade or two, I can tell you that it is wonderfully good news. As you know, there were 3 major planetary ingresses between January 2008 and February 2011. And manifestly, demonstrably, our lives entered a state of continual, systemic transformation, a very disruptive, difficult process of transformation. I think you can all attest to that, just on the basis of what's happening in your own lives and what you've seen going on in the world around you. The extraordinarily powerful energies unleashed by the ingresses and by the new sign placements were subject to gross abuse, political manipulation, demagoguery, the abuse of power, the abuse of trust. Once again, I advise you to look around you, to think back a couple of years, and you'll see that what I just said is true. These abuses of planetary power and energies were rampant. With respect to the Saturn cycle we just discussed, this abuse could still happen. It could still go on without the interference of Saturn, as long as one of the 3 major planets, in this case Uranus, remained free of Saturn's influence or had the upper hand over Saturn. Uranus operated as a doorway, an opening, through which all of these abuses could still pour into the world. But now, fortunately, much to my relief, and much to your relief, I hope, Saturn is in a rulership position with relation to all of the three major planets. That means Saturn is in a position to suppress and otherwise control the irrational, the abusive, the delusory, all the nasty manifestations that we know Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune are capable of, especially in combination. Dreadful stuff, really. But now Saturn's cold, hard, rational, reasonable, sober energy is operating as a damper on these crazier, more destructive, irrational manifestations. I think we have to regard it as a very great astrological blessing that Saturn's influence, Saturn's sobering, rational influence grows so strong just as we are entering a decision-making phase on this vast array of vastly complex and vital issues. With all three major planets under Saturn's sobering influence, irrationality, extremism, and the abuse of power will be curtailed. So the good news, and it really is good news, is that sober, sensible Saturn is ruling the entire volatile, high-energy chart. And it's ruling from the point in the chart where some of the most important things are going on. That's good. The bad news, there's always something. The bad news is that Saturn is likely to inspire intense, extreme levels of impatience and frustration at the slow pace of progress. Saturn always moves very carefully, but it moves very slowly. And most people get quite impatient with that. Now, I communicate fairly frequently with viewers and subscribers to my blog and so on, and I know that you guys are going to want to say, okay, we understand the importance on the macro level, on the broader historical level. What does this mean for us? My goodness. Well, these placements are going to translate into high maintenance situations in each of our lives. On the micro level, it means that everyone will soon find themselves focused on a complicated and demanding problem in some really vital, crucial area of their existence. Now, I've tried to work out the meaning for each individual sign, and if you go to my blog and you look at October's forecast, it's already posted, you'll see my thoughts on how these really complex and important influences will affect each individual sun sign. Getting to my blog is very easy. Just click on the channel icon, go to my channel, look in the upper right-hand corner, and in that corner, a link to my blog will be posted. If you follow that link, it should take you right to October's forecast. Over the past few years, I've heard psychics or precognitive people on the radio, or I've spoken to some of my viewers with precognitive abilities, and they tell me it's really, really hard to see past this period. They run into a mass of white psychic noise, static. They can't see through it. The images, the future will not take shape in their mind's eye. And I think the astrological conditions we are now in the midst of, September, October, November, and maybe a little beyond, are creating this white noise. We are in a period of tremendous indecision in a certain sense, but a period of decision in a more important sense. People are making zillions of decisions, And until they've made these decisions, until they've come face to face with the facts on the ground and made those choices, the timelines will not take shape. And I think we are going through that period now. I think it'll be much easier to see the future after the next few months. I think people's precognitive abilities will start working for them again. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. And for those of you who are wondering about how this will affect you personally, if you go to the sign-by-sign forecast for September in my blog, I hope I will have been able to put something there that is helpful to you. See you next month.